Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. A crazy qualifying session at the Mexican Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is not on pole position, but the big story being that Daniel Ricciardo in an AlphaTauri has out-qualified Sergio Perez at his home Grand Prix. Is this going to be, if there wasn't already a lot of kick-starting moments to Perez potentially being ousted from that seat, the key moment of Danny Ric getting back in a Red Bull next season? So many storylines today. Very much interested your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. First of all, big reports going around as to exactly how the FIA came up with their analysis on which drivers and teams would get their floor plank wear checked at the US Grand Prix. We saw the data yesterday that, okay, while it falls within the realms of possibility of randomness, the fact that Ferrari and Mercedes have far more plank wear checks than any other team does make you think that it might not be totally random, and especially the fact that the top teams tend to have more than the lower teams would make you think the same thing. Autosports say that indeed, yeah, it's not random, and even though the FIA said shortly after the US Grand Prix that, yeah, we do these random checks, turns out it's not random. It's based on observations of onboard video, accelerometer data, as Bryson Sullivan points out, and even the smell of a worn plank can be different. So, you know, I understand that it might make more sense to use suspicion to check certain cars when you can't check every car, but when you're adding in some level of human, it's a human element here, right? It's not randomly assigned. It's done based on humans looking at it and thinking, all right, that might be out of the realms of regulations. This might be within the realms of regulations. And that opens up another, can of worms entirely. So don't know what you guys think about this, but basically they said the other day it was random. The data didn't seem to imply it. And now they're saying, well, actually, no, it's not random. We kind of choose based on who we think might be potentially liable to get disqualified, which might be sensible, but it just opens up another element of potential, open for manipulation, shall we say, which is probably not the best thing for the FIA from a visual perspective from the outside. There was also noted, remember Hamilton said in his interview that his plank only wore 0.05 millimeters above the threshold, which is 1 millimeter. Now, according to AMUS, very reliable reporting, Ferraris on Charles Leclerc had worn by 0.3 millimeters above the limit, and Hamilton's had worn in excess of 2 millimeters, so way beyond the 1 millimeter threshold. Now, okay, whether you believe AMUS or whether you believe Hamilton, whatever, but this makes it even more remarkable to me they didn't check more cars. If Leclerc was 30% over and Hamilton was like 100% over the limit, surely Russell's car was illegal, right? Based on these metrics. Probably Sainz's car was as well, but apparently it's all fine and they can keep those points. So a couple of quick updates on that front. Yuki Tsunoda as well will be starting this weekend from the back of the grid based on, it's unfortunate, right? Monza, you guys probably remember his car broke down on the formation lap, and that basically means he has to take this penalty on a weekend where, again, AlphaTauri are looking really good. And I'm so gutted for Yuki, really, that he couldn't show what he was capable of here in qualifying. I'd have loved to see where Yuki would have been relative to Daniel Ricciardo. But, yeah, what a performance. Don't want to take anything away from Daniel Ricciardo today. And we know that he's great around this circuit. He had that crazy good recovery drive last year, despite the, questionable incident in that second sector you guys might remember. But let's dive into it then. This was practice early on. Albon was delivering pace. And this is crazy in the sense that Albon, this 1:17.9, remained a very competitive time all the way until Q3, but he didn't make Q3 in controversial fashion, as we'll see, and for whatever reason the car wasn't quite under him. It seemed like Williams went for this, they should be quite good around here, the massive straight line, of course. It should help this car in theory. And, they probably go for a max quali setup to try and maximize their position. There was a chance that we thought today Albon might even get to P5 or, top 5 in qualifying. Turns out there was another surprise who was top 5 in qualifying. It actually ended Verstappen first, Albon second, Perez third. Verstappen has topped, every practice session now for the last, month and a half. It's kind of crazy, actually. But let's get into qualifying. Q1 was kind of strange because Hamilton, Russell, Piastri, Norris, and the Ferraris came out on medium tyres, intending to save softs if they could. And Hamilton was actually pretty competitive on the medium, which made you think, all right, maybe on the softs they can be there or thereabouts with the Red Bulls, which might well have been the case. I know that when we get to Q3, we'll see Hamilton wasn't so happy with the way the tyres were going into that final run. But this is when the impeding and the relative incidents that the stewards have got to investigate begin. This is Max Verstappen coming out of the pit lane, and you guys might remember what happened back in Singapore when Verstappen stopped at the end of the pit lane for, I think, 18 seconds This I don't think was quite 18 seconds, but it might not have been too far shy of that, and he blocked Russell and Hamilton in the pit lane at Singapore during qualifying, and he got a reprimand for that. They admitted after the fact that he should have probably got a more severe penalty, but that was a human mistake by the stewards, and, you know, people will look at that and think, well, maybe there's a bit more to it than meets the eye, but regardless, Verstappen was put on the list as potentially, you know, impeding. Then the same thing Russell did, because, you know, loads of cars, a relatively short track here at Mexico. They try and find room, and they basically just park the bus to ensure that they get the most space they possibly can. Russell then got under investigation as well, and this was the quote actually after the Singapore Grand Prix, where Crofty talked to the stewards and said that, yeah, we made a mistake on this. He should definitely have had a grid drop for impeding Tsunoda that we saw during that race, and potentially a second drop for the pit lane incident that was not really much investigated. So this was the situation. Norris, after struggling a bit on the mediums, then went out on the softs and didn't get a good lap together. Made a mistake on his one run, and he would have had another run, but Alonso decided enough was enough on that. So this was the situation at the time, but already, I mean, let's have a look at this, right? It's not just a Q3 out of nowhere, Ricciardo puts together a spectacular lap. He had the pace all day. Danny Rick here, 2 tenths off Verstappen, ahead of Perez in Q1. And Tsunoda in the same car, down 8 tenths off the pace. Now, Tsunoda did give Ricciardo a nice tow, because Ricciardo, you know, needed the help, you would think. At least at this point, it was, you know, probably AlphaTauri thought, all right, let's get some help here getting out of Q1. But, you know, Ricciardo had way more pace in hand than that. And of course, Tsunoda starting for the back anyway. They just used him to give Ricciardo the tow. But nonetheless, that's an impressive lap time, and it wasn't just the tow that was giving Ricciardo all that advantage. Alonso then spins out. Bit of a clumsy mistake coming out of turn 3, spins the car and leaves himself on the racing line when a yellow flag comes out. He, of course, gets it going again, but everyone behind him's lap get ruined at that point. So everyone that was out, and that included Lando Norris. A McLaren that was actually in Friday practice, Norris was the fastest man in the long run simulations. He was the man that on paper was going to be able to bring the challenge to Max Verstappen this weekend. You look at the long runs, the Red Bulls, as always, are just miles clear of everybody, the Mercedes, the Ferrari, and that's probably going to be the case tomorrow again. But, let's be honest, Norris has been there or thereabouts with Max on race pace on tracks that suit the McLaren. This might not be great for the McLaren, but it should be okay. And in race runs, Norris was the one that looked like he might be able to fight for the win here. But starting for P19 is not where you want to be. Potentially P18 with the penalty for Tsunoda. And then we get Hamilton investigated for failing to slow under yellows. Now, this also occurred for other drivers as well. Hamilton was barreling here down the main straight. By the time he gets to the corner, I think he was definitely easing off here, like he can see Alonso in the distance. I don't know whether they'll try and do him for going flat out down the straight. But you got to think, if you're going flat out down the straight, yes, there might be yellows, but you can well see there's nothing in front of you. I don't know. But if he lifted off, they might be able to argue it with the stewards. It was interesting that they immediately put this under investigation. Usually they say, you know, we'll just leave it to the end of the session and then, you know, Mercedes can come in and say their piece. But it immediately went under investigation, which was kind of confusing. And as a recording, we haven't yet got a resolution on this, but I'll give you guys the update when it arrives. But the F1 broadcasters definitely knew what they were doing with this particular storyline, Ricciardo versus Perez. This is a big weekend for Perez, no doubt. It was a weekend where he was rumoured to be announcing his retirement, which apparently is not going to happen. Even, I think, today, Papa Perez, Antonio Perez, said that Perez is going to be driving for Red Bull for the next 10 years alongside Max, which, I mean, yeah, that ain't going to be happening, sunshine. They probably won't both be, you know, Verstappen probably will be gone from Formula 1 in 10 years, to be honest, doing new things. No way, Perez will still be there beyond about 6 months at this rate. And this is, okay, sure, if Perez is a few tenths off Max and he's P4, P5, P6, not the end of the world. But the way that this session worked out with Ricciardo, with the pace that he had, it's, you know, it's straight up unacceptable, this result for Perez in the circumstances. So, Gasly was out, Hülkenberg was out, Alonso, Albon and Tsunoda, of course, who didn't get into Q3, who tried, I imagine, because, you know, he could have helped Ricciardo with a nice little tow. Now, Albon did a good enough lap to get P9, but it then got eliminated. I'm not sure I agree with the stewards on this one, and Albon immediately afterwards was deeply frustrated with this decision. I'll go full screen on this so you guys can see what's going on. Here's Albon over the first corner, over the second corner. And okay, he cuts the inside curb. You guys can see here, definitely at some point, all 2 of his front tyres are off the track. But you got to understand that it's all 4 wheels outside of the white lines to get disqualified. And if you guys have ever played the Formula 1 game, you'll know that corners like this, and corners such as the fast chicane in Melbourne, the Australian circuits, you can cut the corner pretty aggressively because at some point, as your tyres, as Albon's tyres here come back onto the circuit, right now his front tyres are back on the circuit, his rear tyres are probably not off the circuit yet, if you see what I mean. So because the corner is tight, you can cut it and at some point still have one of your wheels within the white lines, even though at some point both of your front and rear tyres do go off the track. So this is a thing that the drivers can do and is legal and it's allowed as long as at some point you have a tyre within the white line. So this is why I'm confused. Now we don't have all the angles here. Maybe it's possible that Albon was all 4 wheels outside of track limits, but from this particular onboard, it doesn't look like it to me. I don't know what you guys think in the comments below, but yeah, from that onboard, it looks like I would have thought that had been fine. But yeah, maybe the steward saw a different angle, maybe they disagreed. Zhou back into Q3, and maybe Albon didn't have much more pace anyway, but looking at some of these Q3 lap times, there might have been something in there from Albon, especially because he did a 1:17.9 in practice, and you know, the track was ramping up since then. So Q3 comes around, and out of nowhere, this is the lineup. So Verstappen pumps in a lap that I thought was probably going to be good enough for pole. We've seen it so many times this year when Verstappen turns up, pumps in a lap that's, you know, P1 by half a second. It's like, all right, let's just all go home. However, Ricciardo all of a sudden goes like a 10th behind Max, and the 2 Mercedes were on used tyres, as Perez also might have been as well. I think he might have been, but you know, still. So the 2 Mercedes were on used tyres, right on each other, as quite often Hamilton and Russell are. Piastri, Bottas further back, but then the 2 Ferraris came out of nowhere, really. Like we talked this weekend, the Ferrari might not be so good here. They didn't expect to be anywhere near pole, but we know that that Ferrari can be a nice little qualifying car. And really, Leclerc and Sainz pump in 2 great laps and put themselves here a 10th ahead of Max. So at this point, Perez is P7, and then the final runs come through. Leclerc and Sainz can't improve at all. They actually fell off the pace dramatically, but Verstappen, I thought that he was going to go P1 quite comfortably, but he didn't. He improved a bit, but it wasn't enough. P3 for Max, with obviously the investigations ongoing. Now, of course, you've got to say P3 is the best starting position in Mexico. This is where you want to start in Mexico because you get that run on the guy in pole down to turn 1. Ferrari will have to work well together to defend from Max, and there's a very realistic chance Max leads into turn 1 and goes on to comfortably win the race. But this is the storyline, right? Ricciardo, Perez. Now, Perez, okay, sure, only a 10th and a half off Max. Max might have picked up a bit of floor damage on his first run. That's what he thought at least. But still, you can't be getting out qualified by an AlphaTauri at your home Grand Prix. As I said, we know that Ricciardo is good at this track. He made that great run last year. He's good at Mexico. The last time I think he qualified in a position like this, I think he went on to win the race. Crazy scenes. Now, Hamilton was probably in position to maybe dislodge Ricciardo, but he had a bit of a bad final sector. He had a yellow final sector at least. Not sure how much slower he was than his previous best. But yeah, Hamilton said the tyres, you know, weren't in the right window and stuff like this. Piastri P7. Russell suffered with the similar thing. So there might have been more pace in that Mercedes, but only P6, P8, which is poor given I'm sure they thought there was more in it after fixing some of their difficulties they had on Friday overnight going into the Saturday. But yeah, what a lineup, right? Ricciardo ahead of Perez, and if Verstappen is to get a penalty or whatever, it could be Ricciardo P3, which would be absolutely ideal. So on pure pace, it's not like it's a disaster for Perez, but this is a big moment for Daniel Ricciardo. He was out for a few races trying to prove himself that he's going to get into that Red Bull, and the rumour is that even if Perez isn't outed now, he's going to be ousted next year, mid-year for Ricciardo. That was talked about a while ago, even before there was talk that Perez is going to be ousted anyway. But this is the statement from Danny Ric. To get into an AlphaTauri, of course, Tsunoda was quite a way off the pace. We'll see how he goes in tomorrow's race, of course, and out-qualify Perez in the Red Bull at his home track. It's like, this is the moment, you would think, that solidifies Ricciardo's spot back in a Red Bull in the very near future. And it might be in the, frankly, very immediate future. This is the type of situation that will make Helmut Marko and Christian Horner say, yep, enough's enough, and Perez, whatever the circumstances were going into this weekend, depending on what happens tomorrow, of course, to some extent, we're pretty sure we know what's going to be happening, and Perez might not be getting back into that motorhome anytime soon. So, yeah, we'll see on the penalty stuff. I'll either splice bits into this video or in the pinned comment, I'll let you guys know what has transpired on that one if I'm still awake. And also this from Leclerc, though, kind of mind-blowing they had the pace. They probably won't have the race pace, so, you know, Verstappen will probably win from wherever he starts, but that Ricciardo-Perez battle, if Ricciardo's pace is legit and it also transfers into qualifying, is going to be a massive story. So very much intrigued to your thoughts and all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.